The phone rang at exactly 2:47 in the afternoon. Richard Thompson didn't usually answer unknown numbers, especially not during board meetings. But something made him glance at his phone that day. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was luck. Or maybe it was just meant to happen that way. He excused himself from the conference room, leaving 12 executives waiting around a mahogany table worth more than most people's houses. The view from his office on the 42nd floor stretched across the entire city. Glass buildings reflected the autumn sun. Tiny cars moved like ants far below. From up here, everything looked small, manageable, under control. "Hello, this is Richard Thompson," he said, his voice carrying that practiced tone of someone used to being in charge. "Mr. Thompson? My name is Jessica. I'm a nurse at Memorial Hospital in Queens." The woman's voice was calm but urgent, the kind of calm that comes from years of delivering difficult news. "Your daughter was brought into our emergency room about an hour ago. She was found unconscious on the street." The world seemed to tilt. Richard gripped the edge of his desk, his knuckles going white. "What? What are you talking about?" "My daughter is at Columbia. She's supposed to be in class right now. Sir, I need you to come to the hospital right away. She's stable now, but she needs you here." "Stable? What does that mean? What happened to her?" His voice rose, something it rarely did. Richard Thompson was known for staying composed under pressure. He'd negotiated billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat. He'd faced hostile takeovers with a smile, but this was different. "I can explain more when you arrive, Mr. Thompson. We're at Memorial Hospital on Parsons Boulevard. Do you know where that is?" "Queens. Why is she in Queens?" "She goes to school in Manhattan. There must be some mistake." "There's no mistake, sir. We found your number in her pocket. She had no identification on her, but she had a piece of paper with your name and this number written on it. Please, Mr. Thompson, your daughter needs you." He didn't remember ending the call. Didn't remember telling his assistant to cancel everything for the rest of the day. Didn't remember the elevator ride down or getting into his car. His driver, James, who'd worked for him for 8 years, took one look at his face and asked no questions. Just drove. The trip from Manhattan to Queens should have taken 20 minutes. It felt like 20 hours. Richard sat in the back of his black Mercedes, staring at his reflection in the tinted window. When had he last really talked to his daughter? Not the brief phone calls where she said she was fine and he said he was busy. Not the texts that consisted of money transferred and thanks received. But really talked? He tried to remember the last time they'd had dinner together. Was it her birthday? No, he'd missed that. Sent flowers and a generous check instead. Christmas? He'd been in Tokyo. Thanksgiving? She'd gone to her mother's place. His phone buzzed with messages from the office. A deal worth $40 million needed his attention. Investors were waiting. Partners needed decisions. He turned the phone off. For the first time in 20 years, Richard Thompson put something ahead of business. The hospital appeared through the car window, a tired-looking building that had seen better decades. Paint peeled from the walls. The parking lot had more potholes than pavement. This was so far from Richard's world of glass, towers and luxury suites that it might as well have been another planet. He walked through the emergency room doors and was hit by the smell of antiseptic and something else he couldn't quite name. Desperation, maybe. The waiting room was packed with people who looked like they'd been waiting for hours. A mother held a crying baby. An old man coughed into a handkerchief. A young couple sat holding hands, worry etched on their faces. "I'm looking for my daughter," Richard told the woman at the front desk. "I got a call from a nurse named Jessica." The woman barely looked up from her computer. "Name?" "Richard Thompson." "My daughter is Lily Thompson. She was brought in unconscious. That got her attention. She picked up a phone, spoke quietly, and within a minute a woman in blue scrubs appeared. She was maybe 40, with kind eyes and the sort of tired expression that comes from too many double shifts. "Mr. Thompson, I'm Jessica, the nurse who called you. Thank you for coming so quickly. Please follow me." They walked through corridors that seemed to go on forever. Richard noticed things he'd never paid attention to before. The way the fluorescent lights flickered. How the floor tiles were cracked in places. The sounds of monitors beeping and people talking in hushed voices behind curtains. "Where is she? Is she okay? What happened?" The questions poured out of him. Jessica stopped at a door and turned to face him. "Your daughter is resting now. Before you go in, I need to prepare you for what you're going to see. Lily is stable, but she's very weak. She's on an IV for hydration and nutrients." "Nutrients? I don't understand. Did she have an accident?" Was she attacked? No, sir. Nothing like that. Lily collapsed from exhaustion and severe malnutrition. When she was brought in, she was dangerously dehydrated. Her blood pressure was extremely low. She's lucky someone found her when they did. Richard felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. Malnutrition? That's impossible. I send her money every month. More than enough for food and everything else she needs. Jessica's expression was hard to read. Not judgmental exactly, but something close to it. I'm sure you do, Mr. Thompson. But perhaps we should discuss this after you've seen your daughter. She opened the door and Richard stepped into a small room. The first thing he saw was how tiny his daughter looked in that hospital bed. Lily had always been small, but now she seemed to have shrunk even more. Her face was pale, almost gray. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. Her arms, resting on top of the white blanket, looked thinner than he remembered. Machines beeped quietly around her. An IV drip connected to her left arm. A monitor showed her heartbeat in steady green lines. She was asleep or unconscious, he couldn't tell which. Lily? His voice cracked. He moved closer to the bed, reaching for her hand. It felt cold and fragile in his. Baby girl, it's Dad, I'm here. She didn't respond. Didn't even flutter an eyelid. She's been drifting in and out, Jessica said softly from behind him. The doctor gave her something to help her rest. She was pretty agitated when they brought her in. Kept trying to leave, saying she had to get back to work. Work? What work? She's a student. Her only job is to study. Richard couldn't take his eyes off his daughter's face. When had she gotten so thin? How had he not noticed? Mr. Thompson, maybe you should sit down. Jessica pulled a chair over. There are some things you should know about why your daughter was found where she was. Richard sat, still holding Lily's hand. Tell me everything. Jessica took a breath. Your daughter was found outside the Hope Center. It's a homeless shelter about 3 blocks from here. She'd been working there as a volunteer. According to the director who came with Lily in the ambulance, your daughter has been volunteering there almost every single day for the past 6 months. A homeless shelter? That can't be right. She's a full-time student at Columbia. She's studying business and economics. Her schedule is packed with classes. I'm just telling you what I was told, sir. The shelter director, a woman named Patricia, said your daughter usually arrives after her morning classes and stays until evening. She helps serve meals, sorts donations, tutors children, whatever needs doing. Richard shook his head. But why? Why would she spend so much time there? And why didn't she tell me? Jessica pulled up another chair and sat down. She had that look on her face again, like she was choosing her words very carefully. Mr. Thompson, I've been a nurse for 18 years. I've seen a lot of things, met a lot of people, and one thing I've learned is that sometimes the people closest to us are the hardest to really see. What's that supposed to mean? It means that while you were wondering where your daughter was and what she was doing, there were dozens of people at that shelter who knew exactly where she was and what she meant to them. Patricia told me that when Lily collapsed, there were at least 20 people around her, all trying to help. Homeless people, other volunteers, families that come to the shelter for meals. They were all crying, all worried about her. Richard felt something twist in his chest. Guilt? Shame? He wasn't sure. I still don't understand why she'd put herself in danger like this. Why she'd skip meals and exhaust herself for strangers. Maybe they weren't strangers to her, Jessica said quietly. Patricia mentioned something else. She said your daughter has been using her own money to buy supplies for the shelter. Blankets, toiletries, food, school supplies for the kids. Patricia tried to stop her, said it was too much, but your daughter insisted. Well, that's fine. I give her plenty of money. If she wants to donate some to charity, that's actually very responsible of her. Jessica met his eyes. Mr. Thompson, I don't think you're understanding what I'm saying. According to Patricia, your daughter wasn't just donating extra money. She was donating all her money. She's been selling her belongings too. Her laptop, her jewelry, even her clothes. Patricia showed me a picture on her phone. Your daughter wearing the same worn-out jeans and t-shirt every day, while handing out brand new winter coats to homeless families. The room suddenly felt too hot, too small. Richard loosened his tie. That doesn't make sense. Why would she do that? Why wouldn't she just tell me she wanted to help these people? I could have written a check. I could have donated to the shelter properly. Could you have? Jessica asked. When was the last time you and your daughter had a real conversation, Mr. Thompson? When did she last tell you what was important to her? What she cared about, what kept her up at night? Richard opened his mouth to answer and realized he couldn't. He had no idea. Their last few conversations had been brief. Her asking about money for textbooks, him asking about her grades, her saying everything was fine, him saying he was proud of her. All surface level, all meaningless. "I've been busy," he said, and the words sounded weak even to his own ears. "I'm running a company. I have thousands of employees depending on me. Board meetings, investor calls, international deals. I provide for her. I make sure she has everything she needs." "Everything except time," Jessica said, and there was no accusation in her voice, just simple truth. "Mr. Thompson, I see families in here every single day. Rich families, poor families, everything in between. And I've learned something. The families that hurt the most aren't the ones without money. They're the ones without connection." Richard looked at his daughter's face, really looked at it. He saw traces of the little girl who used to climb into his lap and ask him to read her stories. The child who'd wait by the door for him to come home from work, even if it was past her bedtime. The teenager who'd stopped waiting, stopped asking, stopped expecting him to be there. When had that changed? When had he become so focused on building his empire that he'd forgotten to build a relationship with his own child? A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. A young doctor entered, reading from a tablet. "Mr. Thompson? I'm Dr. Patel. I've been overseeing your daughter's care. I wanted to update you on her condition." Richard stood up, trying to pull himself together. Back to business mode. That at least he knew how to handle. "What's wrong with her, doctor? What do I need to do? What's the treatment plan?" Dr. Patel looked at him with the same careful expression Jessica had worn. "Physically, your daughter will recover. We're rehydrating her and getting nutrients back into her system. But Mr. Thompson, this wasn't just physical exhaustion. Your daughter has been running herself into the ground for months. This kind of behavior, this level of self-neglect while caring for others, it usually comes from somewhere deeper." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that once your daughter is stable, I'd recommend you both talk to someone. A counselor, perhaps, because healthy people don't sacrifice their own well-being to this extreme unless something else is going on, unless they're trying to fill some kind of void." The words hit Richard like a freight train. A void. Was that what he'd created in his daughter's life? A void so large she had to fill it with the desperate need of strangers because she couldn't fill it with her own father's presence? He sat back down heavily in the chair, still holding Lily's hand. Jessica placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "She's going to be okay, Mr. Thompson. You're here now. That's what matters." But Richard wasn't so sure. Looking at his daughter's pale face, at the machines keeping track of her weakened body, at the evidence of months of neglect he'd been too blind to see, he wondered if being here now was enough. Or if he'd already missed too much. If the distance between them had grown too wide to cross. Outside the hospital room, the city continued its endless motion. Deals were made. Money changed hands. Empires rose and fell. But in that small room, a father sat beside his daughter and realized that he'd been so focused on conquering the world that he'd lost the only battle that truly mattered. The battle to be present, to be there, to be a father, not just a provider. And he had no idea if it was too late to change that. Richard didn't leave the hospital that night. Or the next one. He pulled up that uncomfortable chair as close to Lily's bed as possible and sat there, watching her breathe. Every few hours, a nurse would come in to check her vitals, adjust her IV, make notes on a chart. He'd ask the same questions. Is she getting better? When will she wake up? Will she be okay? The answers were always gentle but vague. She's responding well to treatment. Her body needs rest. These things take time. Time. Richard had spent his entire adult life believing time was money. Every minute had to be productive, profitable, purposeful. He'd built an empire on that principle. But now, sitting in this dim hospital room with nothing to do but wait, he realized how wrong he'd been. Time wasn't money. Time was everything money couldn't buy, and he'd wasted so much of it. On the second morning around dawn, Lily's eyes finally fluttered open. Richard had dozed off in his chair, his neck at an awkward angle, his expensive suit wrinkled beyond recognition. The small sound of her moving made him jolt awake. "Dad." Her voice was barely a whisper, hoarse and confused. "Lily." "Oh, thank God, I'm here, sweetheart. I'm right here." He grabbed her hand, and for a moment she let him hold it. Then slowly she pulled it away. "What are you doing here?" she asked. And there was something in her tone that made his chest hurt. Not anger, exactly. Something worse. Surprise. Like him being there was so unexpected it didn't make sense. "You're in the hospital. You collapsed. A nurse called me and I came right away." Lily tried to sit up, but she was too weak. She fell back against the pillows and Richard saw tears forming in her eyes. Not tears of relief or happiness to see him. Tears of frustration. "I need to get out of here," she said. "What time is it?" "I have to get back to the shelter. It's Tuesday. I'm supposed to help serve breakfast. The kids will be waiting." "Lily, you can't. You're sick. You almost died." "I didn't almost die. Stop being dramatic." She reached for the IV in her arm like she was going to pull it out herself. Hey, stop." Richard gently caught her hand. "Please, you need to rest. The shelter will manage without you for a few days. You don't understand. Those people depend on me. There's this little girl, she's only 6, and her mom works 2 jobs. The girl comes to the shelter after school, and I help her with homework. If I'm not there, she'll just sit alone in the corner. And there's an elderly man who fought in the war, and he doesn't trust anyone else to serve his food because everyone else treats him like he's invisible. And there's—" "Lily, stop, please." Richard's voice broke. "Just stop for a second and look at yourself. You're in a hospital bed because you worked yourself into exhaustion. The doctor said you were severely malnourished. How is that helping anyone?" She turned her face away from him. "You wouldn't understand. Then help me understand. Talk to me, tell me what's going on. Why didn't you tell me you were volunteering at a shelter? Why didn't you ask me for help if you wanted to donate to them?" A bitter laugh escaped her lips. "Ask you for help when? During one of our 5-minute phone calls where you ask about my grades and then have to go because you're late for a meeting? Or maybe I should have sent an email to your assistant and scheduled an appointment." The words stung because they were true. Richard opened his mouth to defend himself, but what could he say? That he was busy? That building a company required sacrifice? That he was doing it all for her? Before he could respond, there was a knock on the door. Jessica, the nurse who'd called him, poked her head in. "Oh, good, you're awake. How are you feeling, sweetie?" "I'm fine," Lily said, though she clearly wasn't. "Can I go home now?" "Not quite yet. But you have some visitors if you're up for it. There are quite a few people in the waiting room asking about you. Should I tell them you're awake?" Lily's face brightened in a way Richard hadn't seen in years. "Yes, please let them in." Jessica smiled. "I'll send them in a few at a time. The waiting room has been packed since yesterday. I've never seen anything like it." Over the next hour, Richard watched in amazement as person after person came into the room. First was Patricia, the shelter director. She was a sturdy woman in her 60s with gray hair pulled back in a practical bun and eyes that had seen too much hardness in the world, but somehow remained kind. "Oh, honey," Patricia said, rushing to Lily's bedside. "You scared us half to death. Don't you ever do that again, you hear me?" "I'm sorry," Lily said, and she started crying. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to cause trouble." "Trouble? Child, the only trouble is you not taking care of yourself. We need you, yes, but we need you healthy." Patricia hugged her gently, then turned to Richard. "You must be the father. I'm Patricia Williams. I run the Hope Center." Richard stood and shook her hand. "Thank you for taking care of my daughter, and for calling the ambulance. It was one of our regulars who found her, actually. Old Joe. He was the one who yelled for help when she went down." Patricia looked back at Lily. "You should have seen it. Must have been 20 people gathered around you, all worried sick. Some of them were crying. Joe kept saying, 'Don't you die on us, Miss Lily, don't you dare.'" Richard felt like an outsider listening to stories about his own daughter's life. A life he knew nothing about. More visitors came. A young woman named Michelle who brought her 3-year-old son. "Miss Lily helped me fill out job applications," Michelle explained. "She watched my boy every Tuesday so I could go to interviews. I just got hired at a grocery store because of her." An elderly man with weathered hands and sad eyes came next. He didn't say much, just held Lily's hand for a moment and nodded. "You're a good kid," he said gruffly. "Best person I've met in 20 years. You get better now." A group of teenagers came in together, shuffling awkwardly. One of them, a tall boy with acne scars, spoke for the group. "Miss Lily's been tutoring us for the GED test. She stays late every Thursday, even when she looks tired. She's the only person who ever believed we could actually pass." Richard listened to all of this in stunned silence. Each person who came through that door revealed another piece of his daughter's life that he'd known nothing about. It wasn't just volunteering. She'd built relationships, made commitments, become essential to people who had nothing and no one else. After the last visitor left, the room felt empty and too quiet. Lily was exhausted from all the excitement, but there was a glow on her face that Richard recognized from years ago, back when she was young and happy. "You've been busy," he said, trying to keep his voice light. "I found something I'm good at, something that matters." She picked at the hospital blanket. "Unlike business classes and economics and all that stuff you wanted me to study. I never wanted you to be unhappy, Lily. Didn't you?" She looked at him directly for the first time. "Be honest, Dad. When I told you I wanted to major in social work, what did you say?" Richard remembered. He'd laughed. Actually laughed. Told her social work was fine for people who couldn't do anything else, but she was his daughter and she was meant for bigger things. "Better things, I was wrong," he said quietly. "What?" "I was wrong. I shouldn't have said those things. I shouldn't have pushed you into business school when your heart was somewhere else." Lily stared at him like he'd spoken a foreign language. "Who are you and what did you do with my father?" "I'm serious, Lily. Sitting here for the past 2 days, watching all those people come to see you, hearing what you mean to them. I realized I don't know you at all, and that's my fault, not yours." She was quiet for a long moment. "Do you want to know when I started volunteering at the shelter?" "Tell me." "It was right after Christmas." "Remember Christmas? You were in London for some deal. Mom was in Florida with her new husband. I spent the whole day alone in my dorm room. I ordered Chinese food and watched old movies and felt sorry for myself." She took a shaky breath. "The day after Christmas, I was walking around the city and I passed the Hope Center. They had a sign out front asking for volunteers to help serve meals. I didn't have anything else to do, so I went in." Richard's heart sank. He remembered that trip to London. The deal had been important. Or at least it had seemed important at the time, more important than spending Christmas with his daughter. "That first day, Patricia put me to work serving soup, and this little girl, she couldn't have been more than 5, came through the line with her mom. She looked up at me with these big brown eyes and said, 'Thank you for the soup, pretty lady. You're an angel.' Just like that. This tiny kid who probably hadn't had a decent meal in days, and she was thanking me." Lily wiped her eyes. "I went back the next day. And the day after that, and I kept going back because for the first time in forever I felt like I mattered. Like what I did made a real difference. You always mattered, Lily." "To who? To you?" She shook her head. "Dad, I got straight A's last semester." "Did you know that?" "I made Dean's List. I called to tell you and you were in a meeting. You said you'd call me back. That was 3 months ago." The words hit him like physical blows. He wanted to defend himself, to explain all the reasons he'd been too busy, but they all sounded hollow now. "I'm sorry," he said, and his voice broke. "I'm so sorry, Lily. You deserved better. You deserved a father who showed up, who paid attention, who knew when his own daughter made Dean's List. I don't need your money, Dad. I never did. I needed you." She was crying now, tears streaming down her face. "When Mom left, I thought maybe we'd get closer. Maybe you'd have time for me. But you just worked more, stayed at the office later, took more trips. It was like I was invisible." Richard moved closer to the bed, and this time when he reached for her hand, she didn't pull away. "You're not invisible, not to me. Not anymore." "What does that mean?" "It means I'm done putting work first. Done missing the important things. Done being the kind of father who doesn't even know his own daughter." Lily looked skeptical. "You say that now, but you'll go back to work and things will go back to normal." "They always do." "No," Richard said firmly. "They won't. Because I'm going to do something I should have done years ago. I'm going to actually be present in your life. Starting now." "How?" "You run a huge company. You can't just walk away. Watch me." He pulled out his phone, the one he'd turned off 2 days ago. When he powered it back on, it exploded with notifications. Hundreds of emails. Dozens of missed calls. Text messages from board members, investors, partners. All of it seeming urgent and important. Richard looked at it all and felt nothing. No panic, no stress. No overwhelming need to respond immediately. He opened his email and started typing a message to his executive team. "What are you doing?" Lily asked. "Something I should have done a long time ago." He finished the email and hit send. "I just told my team I'm stepping back from day-to-day operations for the next 3 months. They can handle things without me." 3 months? Dad, they'll never agree to that. They don't have a choice. I'm the majority shareholder. And I just realized something. I've spent 20 years building a company that will outlive me, but I've only got one daughter, and I've been treating her like she's less important than a quarterly earnings report. Lily was staring at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Hope, disbelief? Maybe both. What are you going to do for 3 months? She asked quietly. Richard smiled, though his eyes were wet. I thought maybe you could teach me about the shelter. Show me why it matters so much to you. If you'll let me, I'd like to volunteer there with you. Once you're better, of course. You want to volunteer at a homeless shelter? I want to spend time with my daughter doing something she cares about. If that means serving soup and tutoring kids and learning why a little girl thinks you're an angel, then yes, that's exactly what I want to do. For a long moment, Lily just looked at him. Then slowly a small smile appeared on her face. You'll hate it. It's messy and loud, and sometimes it smells bad. The work is hard, and it never feels like enough. Maybe, Richard agreed, but I'll be there with you, and that's all that matters. Lily squeezed his hand, and for the first time in longer than Richard could remember, his daughter looked at him like he was her father again. Not a bank account. Not a disappointment. Just her dad. It was a start. Not a solution to years of distance and missed moments. Not a magic fix for all the ways he'd failed her. But it was a start, and sometimes that's all anyone really needs. 3 days later, Lily was discharged from the hospital. Richard had expected her to want to go straight back to her dorm room, rest for a while, ease back into things slowly. Instead, the first words out of her mouth when the doctor signed the release papers were, "Can we go to the shelter?" Lily, you just got out of the hospital. Don't you think you should rest? She gave him a look that reminded him of her mother. Stubborn, determined. Dad, you said you wanted to understand. This is how you understand. By being there, so they went. Not in Richard's Mercedes with James driving. Lily insisted they take the subway like she always did. Richard couldn't remember the last time he'd been on public transportation. Maybe college? The train was crowded, smelled like a mix of coffee and too many people in too small a space, and jerked violently as it moved through tunnels. He grabbed a pole to steady himself and watched his daughter, who swayed naturally with the movement, completely at ease in a world he'd forgotten existed. They got off at a stop in a neighborhood Richard had probably driven past 1,000 times but never really seen. The buildings here were different from Manhattan. Shorter, older, with laundromats and bodegas on every corner. Kids played in the street. Old men sat on stoops. A woman pushed a shopping cart filled with bottles and cans. The Hope Center was sandwiched between a nail salon and a check-cashing place. The building looked like it had been there since the 1960s, with faded brick and a crooked sign. But the front windows were clean, and there were flower boxes someone had planted with bright yellow mums. This is it, Lily said, and there was pride in her voice. Home away from home. They walked inside, and Richard was immediately hit by the smell of cooking food. Something with onions and garlic. His stomach rumbled, and he realized he hadn't eaten properly in days. The main room was large and open, filled with mismatched tables and chairs. To the left was a serving area with steam tables. To the right, a corner that looked set up for kids with donated books and worn toys. Straight ahead, a hallway with signs pointing to restrooms, showers, and a medical room. Miss Lily. The shout came from a small tornado of a child who came running across the room. The little girl crashed into Lily's legs, hugging her tight. You're back. We missed you so much. Hey, Sophie. Lily bent down carefully, still weak, and hugged the child back. I missed you too. Were you good while I was gone? Uh-huh, but nobody helped me with my reading. And Mrs. Patricia said we had to pray for you every day. I prayed real hard. Well, it worked. I'm all better now. Lily stood back up, and Richard saw her wince slightly from the effort. She was pushing herself too hard already, but he didn't say anything. Sophie, I want you to meet someone special. This is my dad. Sophie looked up at Richard with huge brown eyes. She was tiny, maybe 6 or 7, with her hair in lopsided pigtails and a shirt that was 2 sizes too big. Hi, Lily's dad. Are you rich? Sophie. Lily looked mortified, but Richard actually laughed. Why do you ask that? Because you're wearing a fancy suit and your shoes are really shiny. Only rich people have shiny shoes like that. My teacher told me. Well, your teacher is pretty smart. Yes, I have money. Is that okay? Sophie considered this seriously. I guess so. As long as you're nice. Miss Lily is nice even though her dad is rich. I'll do my best to be nice, Richard promised. Patricia appeared from the kitchen area, wiping her hands on an apron. Lily, child, what are you doing here? You should be home resting. I'm fine, Patricia, really, and I wanted to bring my dad to meet you. Dad, this is Patricia Williams. She runs this place basically single-handedly. With a lot of help, Patricia corrected, but she smiled. She shook Richard's hand with a firm grip. So you're the famous father. I've heard a lot about you. I'm sure you have, Richard said, and he meant it. He could only imagine what Lily had said about him over the past 6 months. Well, since you're here, and Lily refuses to rest like a sensible person, you might as well make yourself useful. We're serving lunch in an hour, and we're short-handed today. You ever served food before? Richard thought about the fancy business dinners he'd attended, the catered events, the restaurants where the waiters wore white gloves. Not exactly. Good. Then you won't have any bad habits to unlearn. Come on. Patricia started walking toward the kitchen, clearly expecting him to follow. Lily, you sit down and take it easy. If I catch you doing anything more strenuous than talking, I'm calling your father. He's right here, Lily pointed out. Then I'll call your doctor. Patricia disappeared into the kitchen, and after a moment, Richard followed. The kitchen was smaller than he expected, with industrial-sized pots on old stoves and a prep area that had seen better days. 3 people were already working, chopping vegetables and stirring pots. They all looked up when Patricia brought Richard in. Everyone, this is Richard. He's Lily's dad, and he's volunteering today. Richard, this is Jerome, Isabel, and Danny. They're regular volunteers here. Jerome was a man in his 50s with kind eyes and a gentle smile. Isabel was younger, maybe 30, with tattoos running down both arms. Danny looked like he was still in high school, all gangly limbs and nervous energy. Welcome to the chaos, Jerome said. Fair warning, we're making beef stew today and we're cooking for about 200 people. 200? Richard blinked, give or take. Lunch is our busy meal. We get families, elderly folks, homeless individuals, working poor who can't afford groceries. Anyone who's hungry is welcome. Jerome handed Richard an apron. You know how to chop an onion? I think I can manage that. For the next 45 minutes, Richard chopped onions until his eyes watered and his hands ached. Then he moved on to carrots, then celery, then potatoes. The kitchen was hot, and soon his expensive suit jacket was draped over a chair. His sleeves rolled up, his tie loosened. He couldn't remember the last time he'd done actual physical labor like this. Isabel worked next to him, her knife moving at lightning speed.
So you're really Lily's dad?
The billionaire guy? That's me. Huh. You're shorter than I expected. Richard couldn't help but laugh. Sorry to disappoint. I didn't say I was disappointed. Just making an observation. She swept her chopped carrots into a massive pot. Lily talks about you sometimes. Not a lot, but sometimes. What does she say? Isabel gave him a sideways look. You really want to know? I think I need to know. She says you're brilliant, that you built your company from nothing, that you're probably the smartest businessman she's ever met. She says you work harder than anyone she knows. Isabel paused. She also says she wishes you'd work a little less hard, that she misses the dad you used to be before the company got so big. Richard stopped chopping. She said that? Like I said, she doesn't talk about it much, but yeah. She said there was a time when you used to read to her every night, even if you got home late, when you knew all her friends' names and came to her school plays. She said something changed when she was about 12 and you just got busier and busier until there wasn't room for her anymore. The words hurt because they were true. Lily had been 12 when his company had gone public, when everything had exploded into something bigger than he'd ever imagined, when 16-hour days became normal and weekends at the office became routine. I can't get those years back, Richard said quietly. No, Isabel agreed, but you can do better with the years ahead. That's all any of us can do, right? We all screw up. The question is whether we learn from it. At noon, Patricia opened the doors and people began filing in. Richard had never seen anything like it. There were families with small children, elderly men and women who moved slowly, young people who looked like they'd been sleeping rough, a woman pushing a stroller with a baby, a man in a wheelchair, a group of construction workers still covered in dust from a job site. Richard's job was to serve the stew. He stood behind the steam table with a ladle, and as each person came through the line, he scooped stew into their bowl. At first, he was awkward, unsure how much to give, uncertain what to say. But Jerome was next to him serving bread, and he showed Richard the rhythm of it. Good afternoon, Mrs. Johnson. How's that grandson of yours? Afternoon, Tommy. Cold out there today, isn't it? Get yourself some hot food. Hey there, beautiful. Don't you look nice today? Yes, plenty more if you're still hungry. It wasn't just about the food, Richard realized. It was about the dignity, the recognition, treating each person like they mattered, like they were seen. An old man came through the line, the same one who'd visited Lily in the hospital. He looked at Richard and nodded. "You're the dad. That's right. I'm Richard, Joe." He held out a weathered hand and Richard shook it. "Your daughter saved my life once. You know that?" "No, I didn't. It was a night back in January. Cold like you wouldn't believe. I was sleeping under an overpass and I got so cold I couldn't feel my feet anymore. Couldn't get up. Thought that was it for me." Joe's voice was rough, like gravel. "Your girl found me. Don't know how. Don't know why she was out there. But she called an ambulance and stayed with me until they came. Held my hand and told me I was going to be okay. They said later if she hadn't found me I would have died from the cold." Richard's throat tightened. "I didn't know. She doesn't talk about stuff like that. Just does what needs doing." Joe looked at him hard. "She's special, your daughter. Real special. Don't let her forget that." "I won't," Richard promised. The lunch service lasted 2 hours. 2 hours of serving stew, refilling bread baskets, clearing tables, washing dishes. Richard's feet hurt. His back ached. His hands were raw from hot water and soap. He couldn't remember the last time he'd been this physically tired from work. But he also couldn't remember the last time work had felt this real. After the lunch crowd cleared, Richard found Lily in the kids' corner. She was sitting in a tiny chair reading a picture book to Sophie and 3 other children. Her voice was animated, making different sounds for each character. The kids were completely absorbed, eyes wide, mouths open. Richard leaned against the wall and watched. This was his daughter. Not the polished student he'd pushed into business school. Not the name on a bank account. This was Lily, fully herself, doing what she was meant to do. When the story ended, the kids begged for another one, but Patricia appeared and shooed them off to the play area. Lily stood up slowly and Richard could see how exhausted she was. "You did good today," she said to him. "I chopped vegetables and served stew. You saved a man's life." "Joe told you about that?" She looked embarrassed. "It wasn't a big deal. Lily, it was literally a big deal. He said you saved his life," she shrugged. "Anyone would have done the same thing. But they didn't. You did." Richard moved closer to her. "I met a lot of people today, and every single one of them had a story about you, about how you helped them, made them feel human, gave them hope. Do you have any idea how incredible that is? It's just what needed to be done. No, it's who you are. And I'm sorry it took me this long to see it." Lily's eyes got bright with tears. "You really mean that?" "Every word. You're amazing, Lily. Not because of your grades or your degree or anything I ever pushed you to do. You're amazing because you have a heart bigger than anyone I've ever met. And I'm proud of you. More proud than I've ever been." She hugged him then, right there in the middle of the shelter, and Richard held his daughter like he should have held her years ago, like she was the most important thing in his world. Because she was. Patricia came over pretending to frown but with a smile in her eyes. "All right, you two. Very touching. But we've got evening prep to start. Richard, you coming back tomorrow?" "Tomorrow?" He'd assumed this was a one-time thing. "Sure, we serve dinner every night. We can always use the help. Unless you've got somewhere more important to be." Richard thought about his office. The emails piling up. The meetings he was missing. The deals that needed his attention. All of it seemed very far away and not nearly as important as standing in this crowded shelter with his daughter beside him. "No," he said. "I've got nowhere more important to be. I'll be here." Patricia nodded, satisfied. "Good. Wear different shoes tomorrow. Those fancy ones aren't going to last long in this kitchen." As they left the shelter that evening, taking the subway back into the city, Richard looked at his reflection in the dark window. His expensive suit was wrinkled and stained. His hands smelled like onions. His feet were killing him, and he felt more alive than he had in 20 years. "Same time tomorrow?" Lily asked, and there was hope in her voice. "Same time tomorrow," Richard confirmed. "And the day after that. And the day after that." For the first time since he could remember, his daughter smiled at him like she used to when she was small, like he was her hero, like he'd come home. And maybe finally, he had. 2 weeks passed, and Richard showed up at the Hope Center every single day. Not in his tailored suits anymore. He'd gone shopping, something he hadn't done for himself in years, and bought jeans, plain t-shirts, and comfortable sneakers. The staff at the expensive stores he usually frequented would have been shocked to see what he walked out with. His hands, once soft and manicured, developed calluses from washing dishes and moving boxes. His back ached from standing for hours. He learned the names of the regulars who came through the line. Learned their stories, their struggles, their small victories. Mrs. Chen, who'd been a piano teacher in China and now worked 3 cleaning jobs to support her grandchildren. Tommy, the young veteran who couldn't hold down a job because of nightmares that made him unreliable. The Rodriguez family, where both parents worked full-time but still couldn't afford rent and groceries in the same month. Each person was a universe of complicated circumstances that Richard had never bothered to consider before. It was easier to think of poverty as a simple problem with simple solutions. Work harder, make better choices, pull yourself up. But life, he was learning, was rarely that simple. On a Thursday afternoon, Richard was sorting through donated clothes in the back room when his phone rang. He almost didn't recognize the number, then realized it was his office. His assistant, Margaret, who'd worked for him for 12 years. "Mr. Thompson, I'm so sorry to bother you, but we have a situation." Richard sat down on a box of winter coats. "What kind of situation?" "The Henderson merger. They're threatening to walk away. They want to meet with you personally, or they're taking their business elsewhere. The board is in an uproar. They're saying if we lose this deal, it could cost us millions." 6 months ago, Richard would have been in his car within minutes, would have canceled everything else in his life to save that deal. The old Richard would have seen it as the most important thing in the world. "Schedule a video call," he said calmly. "Tomorrow morning at 9. I'll handle it from here." "From there?" "Sir, they want to meet in person. They're flying in from California specifically for this. Then they can wait until next week. Or they can take the video call. Their choice, Margaret." There was a long pause. "Sir, are you sure about this?" "The board members are already questioning your absence. If we lose this deal, we'll survive. The company will be fine. And if the board has concerns, they can schedule a video call too." After he hung up, Richard sat there for a moment staring at his phone. The old version of himself was screaming inside his head. That deal was important. The company needed him. He was being irresponsible, reckless even. But then he heard laughter from the main room. He walked to the doorway and saw Lily helping Sophie with her homework, their heads bent together over a worn math workbook. The little girl was concentrating hard, her tongue sticking out slightly as she worked on addition problems. "I did it," Sophie shouted suddenly. "Miss Lily, I got them all right." "You sure did. I'm so proud of you. You're getting so good at this." Sophie beamed, and in that moment Richard understood something fundamental. That merger, that deal, those millions of dollars, they'd still be there next week or next month. Someone else could handle them. The company had hundreds of smart, capable people. But Sophie? She needed Lily, and Lily needed to see her father choose her over a business deal. Some moments only happened once, and you couldn't get them back. The next morning, Richard did his video call from Patricia's cramped office. The Henderson people were not pleased about the arrangement, but they took the call. Richard negotiated from a desk covered in shelter paperwork, with the sounds of breakfast service happening outside the door. He closed the deal in 45 minutes and got better terms than they'd originally discussed. When he came out, Lily was setting up for morning tutoring. "How'd it go?" "Done, they signed." "From here?" "They were okay with that?" Richard shrugged. "They wanted the deal more than they wanted to be difficult. Turns out I don't have to fly across the country to make things happen." "Who knew?" Lily smiled, but there was something sad in it. "You know this can't last forever, right? You're going to have to go back eventually. To real life." "This is real life, Lily. That other stuff, the office and the meetings and the constant hustle, that's just work. This matters more. Dad, you can't just abandon your company. That's not realistic. I'm not abandoning it. I'm reorganizing my priorities. There's a difference." Before Lily could respond, Patricia came rushing over, her face tight with worry. "We have a problem. The heat's gone out again. The repair guy says it's going to cost $8,000 to fix, and we don't have it. The emergency fund is already depleted from last month's plumbing disaster." Richard saw Lily's face fall. $8,000? "Patricia, we can't ask people to come in when it's freezing. Dinner's in a few hours and it's 30 degrees outside." "I know, honey. I'm calling around to see if anyone can help, but I'm not optimistic." "I'll handle it," Richard said. Both women turned to look at him. "What?" Patricia asked. "The repair." "I'll pay for it. Give me the guy's number." Mr. Thompson, we can't ask you to do that. You're not asking. I'm offering. What's his number? Patricia rattled off the number and Richard called immediately. He authorized the repair and paid extra to have them come out that afternoon instead of next week. When he hung up, Patricia was staring at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Thank you, she said quietly. That's incredibly generous. It's just money, Patricia. I have plenty of it. Might as well use it for something that matters. Over the next few days, Richard started paying attention to the shelter's problems in a way only someone with business experience could. The walk-in freezer that barely worked, the leaky roof in the storage room, the outdated kitchen equipment that broke down constantly, the lack of insulation that made heating costs astronomical. He didn't just throw money at the problems. He approached them strategically, like any business challenge. He called in contractors he'd worked with on his own properties and negotiated bulk rates. He reached out to suppliers and arranged for regular food deliveries at cost. He even got one of his tech companies to donate computers for the education center. But he did it all quietly, without fanfare. When Patricia tried to thank him publicly, he stopped her. This isn't about recognition. It's about making sure you can keep doing what you do. One evening after dinner service, Richard was taking out trash when he found Danny, the teenage volunteer, sitting on the back steps crying. The kid tried to wipe his face quickly when he saw Richard. You okay? Richard asked. Yeah, fine. Just tired. Richard sat down next to him. I've been tired. That's not what crying looks like. What's going on? Danny was quiet for a long moment. Then slowly the story came out. He was 17, a senior in high school. His dad had left years ago. His mom worked 2 jobs but was barely keeping them afloat. Danny had been accepted to college, a good school upstate, but there was no money for it. He'd been planning to skip college and get a full-time job to help his mom pay the bills. I just feel stuck, Danny said. Like no matter how hard I work, it's never going to be enough to change anything. Richard thought about his own journey. How he'd started with nothing, built his company through sheer determination and a lot of luck. But he'd also had opportunities. A scholarship that covered his tuition. A professor who believed in him. Doors that opened at the right time. What school accepted you? Richard asked. Does it matter? I can't afford to go. Humor me. What school? State University. They have a good engineering program. That's what I want to study. Engineering. Richard pulled out his phone and made some notes. Give me a few days. Let me see what I can do. Mr. Thompson, I wasn't asking for money. I was just venting. I know you weren't asking. That's exactly why I want to help. 3 days later, Richard called Danny into Patricia's office. Lily was there too, at Richard's request. He handed Danny a folder. What's this? The teenager asked. Open it. Inside was a letter from the state university confirming a full scholarship. Tuition, room, board, books, everything covered for 4 years. Danny stared at it, his hands shaking. This is a joke, right? This can't be real. It's real. I established a scholarship fund through my found it.